Hello and welcome back. I'm really glad you're here. This week, I'm talking about our fifth week of summer camp, which was our final week of summer camp. We had 3 weeks in June and 2 weeks in July. This week was a bit different for a couple of reasons. Number one, we had the least amount of kids this week. Usually, traditionally, we have the most kids in June, and then July is a big month for vacations and traveling. So we typically have less kids in July, and that's what we saw this week. This week was our smallest numbers. Also, this was the only week where we had the same kids every day all week. Normally, each day is a little bit different. We have some kids who come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, some kids who just kind of come as their schedule allows. This week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the kids were the same every day. And then I have one student who was only coming on Thursdays, and so he joined us on Thursday. What was interesting about the groups, the dynamic being the same, is that the students really kind of formed two groups based on age, just naturally. At Starfish Social Club, I don't separate the kids by age, but they will sometimes separate themselves that way. Not always. But this week, it also was the personalities of our older students this week tended to be pretty similar, and the personalities of our younger students tended to be pretty similar. And so it was pretty natural for them to separate themselves that way. It doesn't mean that there was no coexisting and there wasn't anything, between them. But when it was time to choose people to play games with and that kind of thing, and on the playground, that's where I really saw that they just kind of went off with people their own age. Another thing that kind of affected the dynamics this week was the awareness that this was our last week. Several of the kids were talking about it during this last week, about this being their last week, especially on the last day. So there was a little bit of, I guess, a little bit of heaviness this week, because I could tell that some of the kids were really not sure how to process that. So many of our kids were new this year. And so I think their experience, number one, of learning and growing and, evolving their social skills, but also being around other kids that they relate to and get along with and enjoy being around. For some kids, Starfish Social Club is the only place where that happens. It's the only place where they really experience that sense of belonging. I think this is true a lot with elementary age students, because in elementary schools are smaller, and you're separated by grade and also by your class. In at least the first few years of elementary school, you're around the same 20-ish kids all day, every day for the whole school year. In upper elementary, maybe you rotate between 2 or 3 teachers, but it's usually still your same class. So in elementary school, kids don't have a whole lot of opportunities to engage with kids who aren't in their class. So this is 5, 6, however many years of kids being around pretty much the same kids year after year, or at least for a year at a time. And so if there's not anybody else that they relate to that's similar to them, sometimes Starfish Social Club is the only place where they get to be around other kids that are like them. I find it gets a little bit easier in secondary, in middle school and high school, because you're around different kids in every class now. And you can even spend time with kids who aren't in your same grade in electives, in, different activities and events. So past elementary school, I find that it tends to be easier for my students to connect with other people. The challenge as the kids get older is that if their social skills are an obstacle, that doesn't get easier as they get older, that gets harder. And so sometimes kids are okay in elementary socially, and then they get to middle school and they're not okay anymore socially. So I think it depends on each kiddo's just different personality and how they relate to other people. For some of the kiddos, they do better socially as they get older because they're able to find and connect to more kids that they didn't have access to when they were younger. And for some of the kids, it becomes harder as they get older because their social struggles become more pronounced. So for all of those reasons, I often find that Starfish Social Club is the place where kids feel like they have connections, they belong, they meet other kids that they get along with. We even have students who have met at Starfish Social Club and gone on to have friendships and relationships outside of Starfish, but that were created in Starfish Social Club. We have students who've gone to prom together. We have students who've gone on vacations together, students whose parents have become close. We have had kids over the years that I swear are going to get married someday. But it's, it's because they have this community where they can be part of something with other kids who they relate to, who are also part of the same thing. So all that to say, I definitely noticed on week 5 that there was a little bit of anxiety from some of the kids about this being our last week. We had one kiddo who this was his only week. We had at least one other kiddo who this was just his 2 kids who this was their second week. And then we had kids who've been there all summer. So it was definitely a mix. So on Monday, throwback to week 4, where I was talking about the student who is learning how to talk to himself in his head. As a reminder, if you think about little kids, they don't understand the concept of saying something in their head. And so everything they think they say. And I compared that to learning how to read silently, right? Little kids, when they're learning how to read, they read out loud. And as they get older, they understand how to read in their mind, in their brain. And it's the same with talking. They learn how to talk to themselves in their brain. Some kids learn this much later and will be teenagers even walking around and talking to themselves out loud. When we're talking about autism, adults do this as well. Just haven't grasped that concept of talking to themselves in their brains. Because the reality is that we all talk to ourselves all day long. We just do it internally. It's an internal dialogue. And when kids haven't learned that, one of the challenges is that it's confusing to people around them because people around them don't ever really know if they're talking to themselves or to somebody. It's also a bit weird, to be honest. It's weird to see somebody talking to themselves and not really know, are they talking to somebody? Are they on the phone? Do they have a Bluetooth earbud in their ear? So it can be confusing. It's also perceived as pretty weird when people are wandering around talking to themselves. So I've been working with this one kiddo since the 4th week on being able to say things to himself. The stage between out loud and in our heads is whispering. Even when we're talking about reading, whisper reading is a thing. So that's the stage in between. This kiddo is trying so hard to talk to himself in his head. It was really a struggle for him to actually be able to take that concept and make it a real thing. He understands it. And he would even say to me sometimes, Steph, I'm going to say that to myself, or Steph, I'm going to whisper that. But his ability to actually do that hasn't come online yet. So we're kind of walking that line weeks 4 and 5, making him aware of it, aware that he's talking out loud to himself, supporting him, and also reminding him when it happens so that he can start to make that transition. This student is going to high school. And so unfortunately, there are things that some of our kids say and do that make it harder for them to make friends through no fault of their own, nothing intentional on their part. But this is a great example of that. Somebody constantly talking to themselves out loud is a great example of somebody who's going to have a harder time making friends because it's considered a socially awkward thing to do. Same if you have a kiddo who picks their nose, kiddos who have big reactions to things. There are just certain social behaviors that are going to make it harder for some of our kiddos to make friends. And for this kiddo, this is one of them. He's a very kind person, very friendly. But this is one thing that I can see that can really hinder him. And so it's important to me that we make as much progress as we can. So that was a big challenge with him this week, is being able to take his thoughts and just make them internal thoughts. On the Friday after week 4 of camp, I got a phone call from the person who owns the building that we've been renting a space in. The space that we were renting this year, it's the same building that we had a space in for 2.5 years before Starfish Social Club went remote. So in San Antonio, we had a space in this building for 2.5 years. And then I called the building owner when I was getting ready to do summer camp this year to see if he had another space that we could use, and he did. So we've been in a different space, but same building. This building, it's not the best building. It's it's not unsafe. Unfortunately, I've been in places before that were not the safest. It's not unsafe, but it's a little bit run down. Some of the suites have their own bathroom. When we were there in the past, we had our own bathroom. There are public bathrooms on the second floor of the building, which is where we were this year. We were on the second floor. We did not have our own bathroom. And in the past, because at camp we have so many kids at a time, we would use the public bathrooms during camp because there's so many kids, and we would all go at the same time when we came back from the park. On Friday, I got a call that the building owner was basically letting me know that my kids had been damaging the bathroom this summer. We have mostly boys. That's always been the case. I don't follow the boys into the bathroom. I don't check behind them in the bathroom. It's just not really something I think about. I don't expect to need to do that. And so I haven't. So I asked him how he knew it was my kids, just to be fair about it. And he said that it was also a problem when we were there before, which was a little frustrating to me because we have never had this conversation. So I've never been aware. We've been there every summer since 2021, and I've never been told that my students are damaging the bathroom. But now I'm being told in 2024 that it's been a problem historically. So I was a little frustrated about that. But he mentioned, some of the things that were happening. And to be honest, there aren't other kids running around the building. It's an office building. So if there's damage being done to the bathroom, I also would assume it was my kids. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't making assumptions and generalizations and that kind of thing, because that wouldn't be fair. So I told him I'd talk to the kids about it. And I also came up with a plan B. Another thing that happened that I noticed is the elevator in the building was broken for a couple days. And I had noticed the couple days leading up to it being broken, I had seen one of the students repeatedly jamming the button over and over and over and over and over instead of just pushing it and waiting. I don't know if that breaks an elevator. Obviously, there's, that's kind of a cliche that that's a thing that breaks an elevator. I don't know if it does or not. I just know that that's not how we should be treating an elevator in a public building, is by jamming the button over and over and over. So that all happened on Friday. I was honestly disappointed, frustrated, upset. It really bothered me to have that phone call. It is hard running a business for kids for many different reasons. And this is one of them. There have been times where I've been concerned we were going to get kicked out of buildings, just because, sometimes kids have meltdowns. Sometimes there are things, happening. So there have been times in the past where I thought we were going to get kicked out. There have been times where, I've been worried about the people that share walls with us. So it just, unfortunately, getting a phone call like that kind of brought all that back up again. So I talked to the kids about it on Monday, and I let them know that for this week, number one, we weren't going to use the elevator. There are stairs. Everybody who was there is perfectly capable of taking the stairs. So even though the elevator had been fixed by week 5, I just let everybody know we just weren't going to take the elevator, because I had seen that not everybody was being appropriate and respectful of it. And we didn't need to take the elevator. We can take the stairs. And I talked to them about the bathroom. And with the bathroom, because I didn't see any of it, I can't talk about specifics. So I just told them about the phone call that I got. I told them that I was told that people were peeling the wallpaper off the walls, which it's things that you wouldn't really think adults would go in there and do, but I don't know. So people were peeling wallpaper off the walls, stuffing toilet paper in the toilet. There was one day where the door to the stall had been broken off the hinges. And when the owner told me that, I said, I can't imagine my kids would have broken the door off the hinges. And his response was that when he was a kid, he used to ride the stall doors. And so, he can absolutely imagine a kid, riding the stall doors. Again, I don't know. I didn't follow anybody in the bathroom. But what we started doing on week 4 was, at the park, on our way out of the park, there are public restrooms. And they honestly are probably in better shape than the restrooms in the building we were in. And I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of this in the last 4 years, that that's actually probably a better option. There are more sinks, there are more toilets. It's actually probably a much better option for us. And I felt kind of dumb for not thinking of it before. So that's all we did on week 4, is instead of going to the bathroom when we got back to the building, we just went to the bathroom when we were leaving the park. And then if anybody still needed to go at any time before pickup, they were able to. But it significantly lowered the number of kids who are using the bathroom in the building. So that was our solution to that. One of my big things is that nobody gets in trouble at Starfish Social Club. And so even if I would have seen somebody damaging something in the bathroom, it would have just been an honest conversation, and there would have been a natural consequence, like that person now has to be escorted to the bathroom or something like that. I think natural consequences are a much more effective way for us to understand how we have affected something than just punishments. So that was one of the things that changed a little bit in week 4. When we came back from the playground, I was trying to think about what kind of activity I wanted us to do. Week 4, the dynamics of the kids in week 4 is a really chatty week. lots of kids who were just more outgoing, more chatty. And week 5, we were definitely back to a more quiet week. And so when we got back, I just kind of made up this game. And what I had the students do is I made up a game where they would get 1 point for every question they asked another person in the group. And the goal was to ask each other questions and see what they could find that they have in common. So we've talked about this before, that the point of a social conversation is to find something you have in common with this other person. So 1 point for asking questions and 2 points when they found something they had in common and could have a conversation about that thing. So I just made a little scorecard, and I announced it. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I gave them some ideas of ways they could ask questions. The easiest way to do social questions is, what is your favorite? And then you get to fill in the blank. What is your favorite animal? What is your favorite sport? What is your favorite ice cream flavor? Whatever you want to ask about. And so once I let everybody know what we were doing, everybody just sat there, which is not unexpected. And so I always just wait. I always just wait to see what's going to happen. The youngest kid at camp started first, and he went up to somebody else and asked a question. And so then I made a big deal about that. And I started 1 point for you and started making a big deal about it. For a lot of the activity, this kiddo was on a roll. He was the first one to, I think we made a goal that everybody would get 20 points. And he was the first one to 20 points, the youngest kid in the whole group, first one to 20 points. For a lot of the other kids, I had to do a lot of prompting. Okay, who do you want to ask next? What question do you want to ask? A lot of prompting for a lot of the other students, but everybody got it done. Everybody got to their 20. And some of them made some really cool connections with each other, which was obviously the point of it, is just to get to know each other a little bit more. But everybody got to their 20 points. And some of them actually ended up, I had to prompt them to move on because they spent so much time having a conversation about something they found in common that they were missing out on being able to earn points by asking somebody else questions. So different skill, right? Maintaining a conversation, different skill. So after that activity, the way that we did game time is I had them choose somebody that they now knew they had something in common with. And then they had to let me know what it was they had determined they had in common based on the conversations they just had. So that was really cool. That's the first time they ended up in the 2 separate groups, kind of by age, just organically, they ended up that way. But it was because I think the younger group all decided they all like to play video games. And the older group decided they all like to play board games and just kind of hang out. And so they ended up in an older group and a younger group. One of the students that was in the younger group, I think there was another kiddo that he just didn't really want to be in a group with. No animosity, no negativity. He just preferred not to be in a group with one of the other kiddos. And so on his own, he just went and asked the older group if he could join them. And of course, nobody ever cares. Nobody ever says no unless there's a reason they're saying no, unless something has happened. But absolutely, yeah, you can join us. So I thought that was a really great way for him to handle that. He never got upset about it. He never said anything rude or negative. He just told the group, I'm going to go join the other group. And then he went and asked the other group if he could join them. I mean, it was very low key. I think I'm the only person who recognized why he had done that. I don't think any of the other kids even knew that it was because there was another kid he just didn't really want to be in a group with. So I thought that was a really great way for him to handle that. Another time during game time on Monday, there were 2 kids playing games together, and one of them I don't remember the game they were playing right now, but one of them was trying to play the game by the rules, the way the game's intended to be played. And one of them was trying to play with his imagination. He was just trying to kind of pretend play and kind of make it up. This is not that uncommon, especially with my younger students. But the struggle is that they don't recognize what's happening. They each think that the other person is trying to play the way that they're trying to play. And they don't understand that they're thinking two very different things. And I think I mentioned this week 2, maybe. I know this has come up before this summer. And so I pointed out to them what I noticed. I noticed that you are trying to play the game by the rules and you're trying to play the game with your imagination. So how do you guys want to handle that? The kiddo who wanted to play by the rules ended up joining another group who was playing a game by the rules. I think it was the group playing Uno. So he ended up just going and playing with them because he just wanted to play a game by the rules. I noticed that there were 2 kids playing. So the 2 kids who were left from the younger group, because the other 2 kids had gone and joined the older group, they were playing together. And one of them, they were pretending, but one of them kept trying to make up all the rules and would try to make up rules that would position him to be in a more favorable position in their pretend game. And the other kiddo just kind of got a little tired of it. He wasn't ever rude or negative, but he said he was going to go play with the other group, which would have left this kiddo by himself because at this point, all the other kids had gone to play with the other group. So I think he realized that. I think he realized that he was going to be without a group, and he agreed to play a new game that the other kiddo wanted to play. So that was a really great level of awareness for him to recognize what was happening and why it was happening, to recognize that his partner was leaving because of the way that he was playing the game. At the end of game time, there were 2 kids playing Uno together. And I was sitting next to them, but I was watching a different group. And all of a sudden, I can hear one of them start yelling and calling one of them a cheater. And so I asked them what was going on. And one of them was saying that there was a disagreement over who had played which card. So again, I wasn't watching them. I don't know. But the kiddo who was upset walked me through how the cards were laid down, and what he was saying made sense. But again, I don't know. I don't know what happened. He was very upset about it, and he was calling the other kid a cheater. The other kid was denying that he had cheated and was denying that he had played that card, which I didn't really expect him to do. If I didn't expect him to deny it if it was factual. So I was honestly kind of confused. I didn't really know what had happened. But it's also not my problem to solve. And so I asked them how they wanted to solve the problem, what they wanted to do about it. And the kiddo who was really upset got up and went to another game. So I just went over and sat by him, and we just had a conversation about how it's always okay to be upset if you think that somebody's cheating or lying. It's always okay to be upset about that. But it doesn't mean that we have to call them names. Like he was calling him a cheater. I don't remember if he was calling him a liar. But he was calling him a cheater. He was being very loud about it. So I said, it's always okay to not want to play with someone if you think they're cheating. And it's always okay to be frustrated by that, but it doesn't mean that we need to call them names about it. And he felt like that was reasonable. And then the other kiddo went and found a different group to play with. So again, I don't know whether one of them was cheating and not being honest about it. I don't know. But I do know that the one who was upset about it chose to go play with somebody else, which is a really appropriate, natural social consequence, right? If the kiddo was cheating, someone not wanting to play with him anymore is the most appropriate natural consequence for that. And it didn't come up again the rest of the week. So if that is what happened, I think that kiddo realized that this would be the way it would end, is that the kiddo he was playing with would not want to keep playing with him. So that was Monday. On on Tuesday, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but because we're mostly boys, one of the things that happens, this happens all the time at Starfish, especially with new kids who haven't been part of this conversation, is we have to have a conversation about farting in front of other people. During summer camp alone, I think we had it 3 times this summer. One thing to be mindful of, those of you guys that are parents, is that for kiddos who are autistic or have ADHD, they often have a difficult time understanding that there are different expectations in different environments. And so one of the things that I'll see sometimes is I'll see a kiddo doing or saying something that I can tell they do or say at home, but is not appropriate to do or say at Starfish Social Club or to me as an adult. And I'll give you guys my favorite example of this. I have many, but this is my favorite. Probably 4 years ago, I had a student that was going to middle school. And I have so many kids. I try to remember what school everybody goes to, but it's pretty impossible. So I was asking him, hey, tell me, what middle school are you going to again? And he got this like slick look on his face. And he said, Poop Middle School. And so I just said, oh, that was a really weird answer. That's definitely not what I was expecting, because I know that's not the real answer. So that actually makes me kind of want to go talk to somebody else. So I brought it up to his parents, who I believe were not together, and learned that this is how he and dad communicate with each other, which is what you would expect, right? He's like 11, but he does not understand different social expectations in different contexts. So number one, I'm not his dad. This isn't home. And so in my context, that was a pretty awkward answer. Not a big deal at all, but it's a great example of how, however our kids act and talk at home is probably going to be how they act and talk out in the world. And so just to be aware of this, even things like I've had kids who come to Starfish and use the bathroom without closing the door. And that tells me that at home, they don't close the door, which at home, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. But if your kiddo is autistic or has ADHD, they don't always understand the difference between being able to go to the bathroom at home with the door open and not being able to do that in public. My suggestion, if your kiddo struggles with these things, is to reinforce the social expectations at home that you would expect in public. It does mean, I've had kiddos that tease about being fat, that in their family, that's a joke. At Starfish, it's not a joke. It's actually hurt some kids' feelings. So just being aware of the way your kiddos talk, the things that you guys joke about, the things that you tolerate or that you allow or that you have no problem with. But if they were to go to a friend's house, or if they were to say or do that at school, it would be an issue. Another story I have, in my previous life, when I was married, I had a stepson, and there was a day early on where he took food off my plate while we were eating dinner. For me, yeah, no, that doesn't fly with me. But because in their family, they have no problem with that. And so nobody had ever set that boundary for him that when it's not your family, when it's your dad's girlfriend, that's probably not okay. So unfortunately with our kiddos, we have to think about this even more because a lot of our kids don't understand different expectations in different contexts. Okay, all that to say, we have to keep talking about farting. So here's my thing for farting. We talk about this during the school year in I think it's in our first module, August through October. So coming up really soon, we talk about farting. We have a lesson one day where we talk specifically about things that we do in a group versus things we do when we're alone. And farting is definitely on that list. And what I tell the kids is that nobody wants to smell your fart and nobody wants to hear your fart. So even though other kids might laugh if you fart in the group, actually nobody wants to smell it or hear it. It's pretty gross. But if this is being reinforced at home, your kiddo's going to have a hard time understanding context. They're going to have a hard time understanding that in other places, it's not funny and it can actually be really inappropriate. So what we talk about is everybody farts. If you know that you're going to, if you know you need to, what can you do? And we come to the conclusion that we can go to another room. At Starfish Social Club, we don't ever use the waiting room when we're in camp. So that's a great place to go. You can also step out into the hallway. So on Tuesday, one of the kids was like, I'm going to go in the waiting room for a bit. But we don't ever go into the waiting room. And so I was like, I don't understand. What are you doing? What's happening? And finally he was like, Steph, I need to fart. So I was so actually proud of that. I was really proud that he was thinking about everybody in that situation and wanting to be respectful of everybody else in that context. For our activity on Tuesday, how did I start this one? Oh, I brought out the Legos. And I don't ever tell the kids what we're going to do for the activity until after we get started. So I brought out the Legos and I set a timer, maybe, I don't remember how long, 2 minutes maybe. And everybody could start building whatever they wanted to for 2 minutes. And when the timer went off, I had them all stand up, leave what they had built in front of them on the table, and move to the next seat. So the week prior, we had done this with drawing, except they took their drawing with them and they just used different pencils at each seat. This time they left what they had built. They were obviously a little bit frustrated about that. One of the kiddos was quite frustrated, not one of the ones I would expect, actually. He's quite frustrated about it, but everybody got up and moved. I am often really impressed and proud of how well they handle all the stuff I throw at them, because I throw a lot of flexible, adaptable challenges at them, and I am really proud of how well they handle it. I do think there is some peer pressure involved. I think if somebody starts to get upset, they can see that the other kids are not getting upset. And so I do think that's involved sometimes. I think they can see that, well, the other kids are moving. The other kids are leaving their Legos. Okay, I can move. I can leave my Legos too. So then they got to move to each seat. And at every seat, there was something that someone else had already started building, and they just got to add on to it. And then a couple minutes later, move to the next seat and add on to whatever people have been building in that seat, all the way around the circle. A couple of the kids kind of silently protested and didn't build anything anymore. One of the kids that I was surprised was upset about it, just didn't build anything for the rest of the time, which is totally fine. It is okay to make that choice. But the rest of the kids were really into it. They actually had a really fun time seeing what was there and adding onto it. And some of the structures actually became really big. They built some really cool things. And then after that, after the challenge, I always let them do the activity however they want to. So they got to build however they wanted to until activity time was over. I think it's, we do the same with drawing. They can, once the activity time is done, they can draw whatever they want to until activity time is over. So it's kind of just like a way for them to decompress after doing something difficult. One of the things that I did say, it's fun. There's been a couple times this summer where somebody's gotten upset about their piece in a game or the marble towers or what they're building, and they'll say something like, "That's mine." And I just always say, "No, it's not. It's all mine." And every time I say that, everybody's like, oh yeah. But I find that it lessens the tension around it. Like, actually, it's not yours, it's actually mine, and I'm allowing you to play with it. And I don't ever mean that seriously, but I find that when I say that, it lessens the tension around whatever it is that's happening. So with the Legos, somebody got a little frustrated at what somebody else was building on what they had started. And he said something about, well, I don't want him to build that on mine. And so I just said, well, it's not yours. It's mine. They're all mine. And he was like, oh, okay. During this activity on Tuesday, something really cool happened. One of the kids started humming or singing, I think singing a little jingle. And I don't remember if it was a real jingle or a made up one, but very quickly, several of the other kids joined in. It was actually really amusing. I was very amused by it, but I also knew it was getting old really quickly to the kids who weren't participating. I didn't want to be the one to say something because it's not about me. I waited to see if somebody would say something, who it would be, and how they would say it, because I don't know, it's a mystery. So sure enough, after a little bit, one of the kids who's been struggling with giving people harsh feedback gave them appropriate feedback and asked them to stop. So I was really proud of him. He said it really appropriately. So the kids stopped. And then shortly after, one of them started again and a second one joined in. I think at one point there were 5 of them doing it. So the rest of them did not join in. But I reminded them that they had been given feedback. They had been asked to stop. One of the kiddos just kept doing it. I think there's a chance that this jingle was stuck in his brain. And I think it's possible that he was not even consciously aware when he would start to sing it again. I think that's entirely possible that he was not even aware he was doing it. But the problem is that it happened 5 times. 5 times he was asked to stop. So I finally told him, this is when we were doing Legos, that if he wanted to keep doing that, he would need to take what he was building and go build it in another room. And that's the point that we got to. So I had to ask him to go build it in another room. He is a kiddo who has had some rough days at camp. And so when things like this happen, I'm not always sure what the outcome is going to be, but I also don't avoid it. I don't change my response to somebody just because I think it might cause a meltdown. I don't avoid that. So I wasn't sure how he was going to respond. I just knew he had been asked 5 times to stop doing this thing, and he continued to do it. And that's not fair to all the other students in the group who have been asking him very appropriately to stop. So when I let him know that he would need to leave the group, he got upset and he said he was like leaving. The other kids started saying things like, you can't leave. It's too hot for you to walk home. You're going to get too tired before you even get home. I didn't say anything, but it was interesting to me how they were saying things like that. Like, you can't leave. There's nobody here to take you home. And he was listening to these things being said. And then he just went into the other room and sat down. So I was really glad for the kiddo who gave feedback appropriately, the kiddos who stopped after they were asked to stop, and this kiddo who, even though he was upset, he didn't have a meltdown over it, which he has in the past. He was able to make some different choices today. For game time, I had them all choose their group and choose their game. And then once they got started, I set the timer. Every 5 minutes when the timer went off, they had to stand up and move clockwise in their group and sit down in a new seat, which meant they were now a new color in their game or had a new hand of cards in front of them, whatever the case may be based on the game they were playing. 2 kids were pretend playing with pieces from chess. They were battling. So they just had to switch battle spots every time the timer went off. They did a really good job with that one. And it was funny because I reinforced again how in one of the games, somebody won. Sometimes the games don't finish by the time that game time is over. But in one of the games, somebody won. And I pointed out how it wasn't actually that person who won because everybody in the group had been that color. So it was that color that won, but everybody in the group helped that color win. And so that was just a cool twist on that. Another thing that happened is 2 of the kids were playing aggravation, the marble game, and it's got a lot of marbles on it. And one of the kids, I don't remember what he was doing, but whatever he did hit the board and the marbles went everywhere. And what I noticed, there were just two kids playing. Neither one of them had any kind of reaction to that. I mean, it ruined their game. They had to start the game all over. Neither one of them had any kind of reaction to that. They were just like, oh, well, let's just start over. So I thought that was really cool. One of them I wouldn't have expected to have a big reaction, but I mean, something like that is just kind of frustrating. Even if you don't get overly upset about it, it's still kind of frustrating. And neither one of them had like any kind of reaction to it. They were just like, oh, let's just start over. So I thought that was really cool. Okay. That's a great place to stop. That's the end of the day on Tuesday. So I'll go ahead and wrap up this episode with Monday and Tuesday. And then next week's episode, I'll talk about Wednesday and Thursday. I am really glad that you're here, and I'll see you again next week for our last episode covering summer camp this year.